Today, we're doing trigonometry, chapter 1, section 3, the second part. This is the signs of the trig function. I'm your host, Dr. D. Okay, so the second part of section 3, we're going to talk about the signs of trig functions. Wait a minute, I thought sine is a trig function. Okay. The signs, positive or negative, of the trig functions. Okay, so first of all, let's look at our xy coordinate system. And as you remember from Algebra 1, we have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. X is positive when you go right, and it's negative when you go left. And y is positive when you go up, and it's negative when you go down. So, that makes x positive in quadrants 1 and 4, because that's where x is right. And then x is negative in quadrants 2 and 3, because that's where you go left. Okay, y is positive when it's up, so that's 1 and 2. Then y is negative when it's down, that's 3 and 4. And r, the radius, is always positive. No matter what quadrant you're in, the radius of the circle is always positive. Okay, so let's look at the trig functions then. You remember that sine theta is y over r. Well, if r is always positive, then where is sine theta going to be positive? Right, it's going to be positive where y is positive, which means up. So that's 1 and 2. Then obviously sine theta is negative in the third and the fourth quadrants, because that's where the angle is going down. Now, cosine is positive when x is positive. So that means it's positive in 1 and 4. It's negative then where x is negative, and that's 2 and 3. All right, so the key thing here is that you associate sine with x or with y. And that means sine is a up or down thing. Then we associate cosine with x. And x is a right or left thing. That's the key thing then. When you see sine, you're thinking y up or down. You see cosine, you're thinking x. So that's right or left. So sine's positive, up, negative, down. Cosine is positive, right, and negative, left. Now, tangent is y over x. So where's tangent going to be positive? Well, where x and y have the same sign. Well, where is that going to be? Well, that's going to be either in the first quadrant or the third quadrant. Because in the first quadrant, you have a positive over positive, which makes positive. Third quadrant, you have a negative over negative, which also makes positive. Now, tangent is going to be negative in quadrants 2 and 4. Why is that? Well, because in quadrant 2, you're going left and up. So y is positive and x is negative. So y over x becomes negative. Now, in quadrant 4, you're going down and right. So y is negative, x is positive. In both of these cases, your tangent is going to be negative because positive over negative or negative over positive equals a negative. Okay, so remember, the sine function is linked to y, so sine's positive up, negative down. Cosine is linked to x, so cosine is positive right, negative left, and tangent is linked to both x and y, so it's positive where x and y are the same sign, and it's negative where x and y are opposite signs. Okay, now, this seems to me to be the simplest way of remembering it. Just sine, up, down, cosine, right, left, piece of cake. But some people don't like it to be simple. So what they do is they make a chart. So, which trig functions are positive in the first quadrant? Well, sine is positive because it's up. Cosine is positive because it's right. Tangent is positive because sine and cosine are both the same sign. So in the first quadrant, all are positive. Now, which trig functions are positive in the second quadrant? Well, sine is positive because it's up. Cosine is negative because it's left. Tangent is negative because sine and cosine are opposite signs. So the only trig function that's positive in the second quadrant is sine. Now, third quadrant, sine is negative because it's down. Cosine is negative because it's left. Tangent is positive because both sine and cosine are the same signs. Fourth quadrant, sine is negative because it's down. Cosine is positive because it's right. And tangent is negative because sine and cosine are different signs. Now, just like in music, you have the spaces are F, A, C, E, and the lines are E, G, B, D, F. And people have come up with ways of remembering them. Every good boy does fine, of course. But when you're actually a musician, you realize you're not thinking every good boy does fine. You just look at the bottom and that's an E. And you don't even think twice about it. So that's the same thing with this. Now, people have come up with acronyms for ASTC. One of my favorite is all students take calculus. Of course. Okay, that's enough of that. Okay. Or, one of my personal favorites, another stupid teacher's chart. Okay, the reason this chart belongs to stupid teachers is because it's not really a good way of remembering it, having ASTC and then having to think what those mean. It's much easier to just think sine is positive up, negative down, cosine's positive right, negative left, and tangent is positive upper right, lower left, and negative upper left, lower right. Easy. Okay, cruising onward. We have a new game here. The name of this game is Name That Quadrant. Okay, we'll be playing for exciting prizes here. If sine theta is less than 0 and cosine theta is greater than 0, then name that quadrant. Okay, you should have it by now. All right, think about this. Sine theta is less than 0. That means the angle has to be down, because where sine is negative, you're going down. Cosine is positive. That means it's right. So, if we're down and right, what quadrant is that? Yes, it is quadrant 4. Okay. Now, next game. Tangent is less than 0, and secant is less than 0. Ooh, that just gives you a little tingle there. All right, so what do we do? Well, if tangent is less than 0, that means you're either in 2 or 4. Now, if secant is less than 0, well, secant is a reciprocal of cosine, right? So that means if secant's less than 0, then cosine is also less than 0. And if cosine's less than 0, then you have to be left. So you combine either 2 or 4 with left, and you know it's got to be 2. That's it. Okay, so that's how you do this. You just figure out if you're right, left, up, or down, and you combine the two, and you'll get one single quadrant. Okay. Now, given that sine theta is negative 3/5 and cosine theta is positive, find all the trig ratios with their correct sign. So let's check that out. What you want to do, because we know that sine is negative 3/5, that means opposite over hypotenuse, which equals y over r, equals negative 3/5. So what I do is I construct an angle where the opposite side is negative 3 and the hypotenuse is 4. So that means the opposite side means I'm going down 3 because it's negative 3/5, and my radius is 5, my opposite is negative 3. Now, where else can I have negative 3/5 sine? Here is negative 3 and also radius of 5. So in either the third or the fourth quadrant, notice sine is down and opposite over hypotenuse is negative in both cases. That's why we need our second piece of information, that cosine is positive. So because I know cosine is positive, that means this angle is out, because it's got to be right for cosine to be positive. All right, so now I'm ready to look at all my trig functions. So I have the hypotenuse is 5, the opposite is negative 3, Pythagorean theorem says that the adjacent has to be 4. Now, if I wasn't sure of that, I could make an equation out of it. I would say x squared plus 3 squared, well, negative 3 squared, equals 5 squared. So 3 squared is 9, so x squared plus 9 equals 25. Subtract 9 from both sides, x squared equals 16, and take square root of both sides, x equals plus or minus 4. Well, here's your minus 4 there, here's your plus 4 there. So there's your x value. Okay, now I just found out all 3 sides of my triangle, and anytime you have a trig ratio, that's basically 2 sides of a right triangle. Now, we want all trig ratios. So sine theta obviously is negative 3/5 because they gave it that to us. Cosine theta is x over r, 4 over 5. Tangent theta is y over x, so negative 3 over 4. Now we'll do the reciprocal functions. Cosecant theta is a reciprocal of sine, so that makes negative 5/3. Secant theta, which is the reciprocal of cosine, becomes 5/4, and cotangent is a reciprocal of tangent, so that makes negative 4/3. Okay. There's all 6 trig ratios from knowing your sine and one other trig function. Okay, cruising onward. All right, now we're going to talk about the trig ratios at the quadrantal angles. Now, quadrantal angles are the angles that border the quadrants. Those are going to be 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and 270 degrees. You can see the border of quadrant 1 and 4 is 0 degrees, border of quadrant 1 and 2 is 90 degrees, then 180, 270. Those are quadrantal angles. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to let the radius equal 1 for all these angles. So in other words, I'm drawing a circle with radius 1 at the center being the origin. So this circle will hit the positive x-axis 1 to the right, so it's at the point 1, 0. And then at the top, it's going to be 0, 1. At the left, it's going to be negative 1, 0, and straight down, it's going to be 0, negative 1. So I know that my sine is y over r. Now remember, r is 0, so basically sine, which is y over r, equals just the y value at 0 degrees over 1, which equals 0. So the sine of 0 degrees is 0. Now, let's go with the cosine of 0 degrees. Well, the cosine is x over r, which equals, now at 0 degrees, the x value is 1. So that means the cosine of 0 degrees is 1. Then tangent of 0 degrees. Well, tangent is y over x, which equals y 0 over x, which is 1. So tangent of 0 degrees equals 0. All right, now let's go on to sine of 90 degrees. Well, 90 degrees, y over r, y over r is 1. So y over r equals 1 over 1, which equals 1. So the sine of 90 degrees is 1. Cosine of 90 degrees is x over r. Well, the x value at 90 degrees is 0. So cosine of 90 degrees is 0. Then tangent of 90 degrees, y over x, which is 1 over 0, that is undefined. So tangent of 90 degrees is undefined. Now, what about 180? Well, sine is y over r. At 180, the y value is 0, and so sine of 180 is 0. Then cosine of 180, x over r. Well, the x value is -1, and the y value is, or the r value is 1, so cosine of 180 is -1. Tangent of 180 is y over x. That's 0 over -1, which equals 0. And then 270 straight down. So y over r equals -1 over 1, which equals -1. So sine of 270, -1. Cosine of 270, well, x over r equals 0 over 1, which equals 0. So cosine of 270 is 0. And then tangent of 270 is y over x, which is -1 over 0, which equals undefined. All right, so clearly I want you to memorize this, but it's a lot easier to memorize if you just look at sine as up or down. So let's look. Sine is up or down, so the sine of 0, well, how far up or down is 0? It's 0. Sine of 0 is 0. 90 is 1 up, so sine of 90 is 1. 180 is up or down 0. 270 is up or down, it's down 1. That's it. Now, cosine is right or left. So cosine is 0, well, that's right 1. Cosine of 90, that's right none. Cosine of 180, that's left 1. And cosine of 270 is right or left none. Tangent is y over x. So you see, tangent at 0 and 180 are 0, because at 0 and 180, you're right and left 1. Now, if you go with 90 and 270, then it's up or down divided by left or right. Well, left or right is 0, so anytime you're going left or right, none, then your tangent is going to be undefined. So, if you just see the unit circle in your mind, you should be able to do sine, cosine, tangent for any one of those angles. Okay, cruising onward. Here's our example problem. We have an angle beta. Now this is a beta. It's not a theta, it's not a b, it's a Greek letter, beta. Now, beta is an element between 0 degrees and 360, including 0, but not including 360. So beta could be 0, but it wouldn't be 360. Now, we want to find beta without a calculator. They're telling us that sine beta is 1. So that means, what could beta be? Well, sine beta being 1 means it's up 1. Cosine beta being 0 means it's right or left none. Well, where are we if we're up 1 and right or left none? that would be at 90 degrees. So beta equals 90 degrees. Okay, next, if secant of beta is undefined and sine is -1, then what's beta? Well, if secant is undefined, that means that the reciprocal of secant is cosine. So if secant, let's say secant beta would be r over x, is undefined. Now the reciprocal of secant is x over r, adjacent over hypotenuse, and if r over x is undefined, then what that means is x has to be 0. Now if x is 0, then that means 0 over anything is 0. So x over r is 0, and so basically what we could take from that is x equals 0. That means I'm right or left 0. Now sine is -1. So if sine is -1, where does that have to be? Well, that's down 1. So if I'm right or left 0 and down 1, what angle is this? It's 270. So beta equals 270. That's it, game over. Okay, now, one more game. We want to state the quadrant of theta and the sine of the function. So, we look at sine of 648. Now, 648 is more than 360. So if I subtract 360 from that, I have a coterminal angle that's going to be in the same location. So sine of 648 is going to be, now notice, let's just go 648 minus 360. So by subtracting 360, I'm just going one circle around. So I've got 288. So sine of 648 is the same as saying sine of 288. And where is that? Well, if I go around 180, 270. Now I need 18 more degrees. So there is 288 right there. 288. So it's in the fourth quadrant. So now notice what we're finding. We're the quadrant of theta, so that's quadrant 4. And the sine of the function. Well, sine of an angle that's going down is negative. That's it. All right, now, cosine of -714. Now, what I do with the negative is it's got to go the opposite direction. So if I'm going negative, that means I'm counting my angle this way. So there's -360. Now, I need to keep going because I still haven't gotten into positive angles yet. So if I go a second time around, then I've basically added 720 to that. So what I'm going to do is go -714 plus 720, and that is going to end up being 6 degrees. So 6 degrees, basically cosine of -714 is cosine of 6 degrees. And that's in the first quadrant. So quadrant 1, And 6 degrees is right, so that makes the cosine of negative 714 positive. So what we did with the first one was we subtracted 360 until we got down to a number between 0 and 360. The second one, we added 360 until we got to a number between 0 and 360. So here we are again, tangent 1024. What I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 360 until I have a number between 0 and 360. Okay, now 1024 degrees. What we want to do is we want to subtract 360 until we get it down in between 0 and 360. So clearly I can subtract more than 360. So we're going to subtract 720 all at once. So 1024 minus 720 is going to equal 304 degrees. So basically when we go from tangent 1024 degrees to tangent 304 degrees, all we did was go 2 full circles clockwise. Okay, so tangent 304 degrees, well 304 is in the 4th quadrant, and tangent in the 4th quadrant is negative. That's it. Have fun with these.